Hey everybody, it's Meg
and Greyson
with Ensemble Properties at DeRonja Real Estate here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Today we wanted to talk about the difference between due diligence and earnest money deposits in the North Carolina contract. It's different than in a lot of other states and it can trip people up. So we thought a fun way to approach this would be to take on the role of seller
and buyer
to help you better understand the difference between these deposits depending on which side of the transaction you're on.
Great day for hockey, ain't it? Sure is, cowboy.
All right, I've been looking and looking for homes, and I finally found the one. I want her house, and it's time for me to sit down with my agent and talk through the terms of the contract.
Fairy dust.
One of the first things we're going to talk about is the due diligence period. It's a period of time in the contract. It's negotiable. Maybe it's 3 weeks. Maybe it's 30 days. All things are negotiable.
Alrighty then.
During the due diligence period, as buyer, I want to get done my inspections. I want to get done the appraisal. I want to make sure I have conditional loan approval, and I may want to leave some time to see if I have follow-up inspections or to even negotiate potential issues I found during the inspection, or heaven forbid, if the appraisal is short.
Help me, I'm poor.
To recap, buyer, I want that time longer so I have more time to do my homework.
And I want that period of time to be as short as possible.
As a function of that due diligence period, there's also something called the due diligence fee.
So the due diligence fee is different than in a lot of other states. Number one, it's due at the time of contract. We get asked a lot, do I have to write this check before I've even had my offer accepted? No, you get to write that check after your offer has been accepted. As a seller, I want this number to be very large. It's non-refundable. This is my insurance policy that the buyer is not going to walk away.
Show me the money!
The buyer wants this fee to be
A little more manageable, so that if something were to come up during due diligence fee and I walk from the contract, it does not sink me as a buyer.
The other piece of the deposits in North Carolina is the earnest money. And in our contract, we have two types of earnest money. We have initial earnest money and additional earnest money. Like their names imply, initial is due up front and additional is due later on prior to closing, often the last day of due diligence or the day after.
I'm waiting!
Important to note that the seller does not get her hands on either one of those. The buyer is writing those to an escrow agent, or a lot of times it's going to be the closing attorney, and that money is going to be held on the sideline. Now, if I go all the way to closing, similar to due diligence money, which she may have already spent since she's had it on day 0 of the contract, I get credit for the earnest money deposit and due diligence fee at closing. So now let's talk through the how and the how much. First up, the how. We talk through the fact that the due diligence fee is written to Mr. and Mrs. Seller at the time of contract, and while we're getting better at sending money digitally, this is typically a personal check. So if you don't have a checkbook,
Millennials.
Are you trying to hurt my feelings? Because if so, you are succeeding.
you may want to get one of those before you start your home search. Also, keep in mind, we may not have your bank in our market if you're relocating. For the earnest money deposit, that is not written to the seller. They don't get their hands on this in the beginning. This goes to an escrow agent. In our market, that is typically going to be the closing attorney. So for the how of where that goes, if it's upfront, it could be a personal check if you've got it. It could also be a wire sent to the closing attorney. If it is additional earnest money that is due later in the contract, now that has to be immediately available funds. So no longer can we use that personal check. That has to be a cashier's check, or more often than not, it's once again a wire sent from the buyer's account directly to the closing attorney.
And that's really what most people ask us is, how much do I need to offer for due diligence? How much do I need to offer for earnest money? And unfortunately, the answer is, it depends.
What the hell are you talking about?
When we started in real estate, it was not uncommon to say that the due diligence fee and the earnest money together add up to around 1% of the sales price. So for a $300,000 property, you might offer $3,000 total divided among due diligence and earnest money. What we've seen in a low inventory market over the last few years in Raleigh and the Triangle in particular is that the seller, me, has more leverage than the buyer. And so in order to incentivize the seller to take their offer, the buyer is offering higher and higher due diligence fees to demonstrate their seriousness with the property.
Fellas, look what I found in my pocket. Look, a year's salary right here.
Also, since the due diligence fee is due at the time of contract and is not protected, that is the number that the seller cares the most about. 9 times out of 10, if a buyer is going to walk away during the under contract period, they're going to do it during due diligence, and they're not going to risk losing their earnest money. So it's not uncommon to see a much higher due diligence fee and a lower earnest money deposit, because again, that's what the seller really cares about. That is the buyer's skin in the game.
You're getting in waters deeper than you think.
And we've seen those numbers grow well beyond 1% of the sales price in certain circumstances, and sometimes we still get to stick with that 1% of the sales price. Again, a good agent is going to be able to advise you based on the property, based on the location you're looking in, and market conditions.
We hope you found this information helpful, whether you are in the buyer's chair or the seller's chair anywhere in North Carolina.
And we hope that you'll consider subscribing to our YouTube channel or liking this video. You can also find Ensemble Properties on Instagram or Facebook. And if you're thinking of making a move in the Triangle, give our team a call.
Best ensemble ever!